So hello, Jaakko. The screen is yours.
So thank you for having me this morning. So I wanted to give you a short overview of the initiative that we have been working on for the past 3 years. And so basically, the initiative is called SOFI, so Science Advice Initiative of Finland, and it's an experimental initiative focusing on building next generation science advice ecosystem in Finland. It's a joint venture by 4 Finnish academies, and it has been funded by the Ministry of Education and Culture. So it's basically an experimental initiative trying to find new ways of bringing science to support policymaking better than it currently does. And so our main objectives have been, one, to build a new permanent science policy platform here in Finland. And secondly, a cultural objective is to promote dialogue between researchers and decision makers. And thirdly, is to facilitate discussions on future of science advice. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the methodology that we have used in our development work and the pilots that we have been running and our main achievements in the project. So the methodology, so basically once we're working as an experimental development initiative, what we do first is try to find a good as possible evidence base on try to understand how the existing ecosystem of science advice is in Finland. What are its bottlenecks? What are its main challenges? What are the potential opportunities that we could leverage as a development initiative and do interventions on? So we used a methodology familiar from social sciences called triangulation. So we collated evidence with different methods from different sources, trying to understand how the Finnish ecosystem exists. We did system mapping of the existing institutions and actors. We did research literature reviews from international and national literature. We did background interviews with about 300 stakeholders, from civil servants to politicians, to young to old researchers, to administrators in universities and to funders, for example. We also did a survey among the fellows of the Finnish academies. Over 400 professors replied to that survey. We did build very close international networks with actors like INGSA, ESA, and the European Commission's JRC early on to try to understand what would be the best and most suitable international benchmarks for us to look at, and then understand of how we could build our development initiative in a dialogue with those actors. And so we found a certain set of challenges that are repetitive in most of these science advice ecosystems. So basically things like time pressures or different time scales of research and decision making, or politics, or different cultures or languages, or insufficient understanding of the scientific methodologies, and these kind of challenges that you may be familiar with as well. So this is a kind of broad overview of a map of challenges that we identified early on as a general challenges. And then we try to contextualize those in the Finnish context, of trying to really understand that what is it and how do they occur in the Finnish system, in the ministries primarily. We work with the Prime Minister's office and with ministries primarily. Do those challenges exist in there? If they do, how do they exist in everyday life? And what would be the underlying reasons for those challenges existing? Based on those challenge definitions that we tried to together formulate with the ministry, civil servants, and the politicians, we run experiments on interventions. I'll tell you a little bit more about the pilots we did, but basically, so we did experiments on those pilot concepts. Then we evaluated them together with the researchers and the participants, like civil servants and the politicians. And then we reiterated them again to another round of experimentation. So just to give you shortly the idea of the challenge map. So basically, these were the core challenges that we identified that we were tackling there. So first one was that the policymakers have challenges in making sense of the totality of available evidence. So there's multiple streams of evidence. It's very fragmented. It's very hard to get the overview, the big picture of sense making, of trying to understand what does all this evidence mean. What should I make of all of this evidence? To see the wood from the trees, basically. The second one was the lack of fit-for-purpose high-quality evidence synthesis. There's a lot of high-quality evidence available, but it's synthesizing, especially for policy purposes, is a big challenge here in Finland. Also, there's a path dependence on the utilization of experts. The same experts are used primarily because of the time pressures. They know each other. Necessarily, they don't know who else to turn to as well. So it keeps repeated the same experts. And also that researchers have challenges in contextualizing their works for policy setting. So these were the primary challenges that we started to tackle. We try to analyze the underlying drivers of it. So basically, once you do an intervention, you don't build it tackling the challenge, but tackling the underlying drivers of it. Some of these are clearly systemic. So we're not claiming that we can and have been able to solve all of these. There are things like, researchers' career incentives, which are a big incentive structure, for example, on participation. And this is a systemic issue that not a single development initiative can solve itself. But so to give you a short overview of the pilots that we run on the kind of new operating models that we are trying to embed in the ecosystem here in Finland. So to give the first one is the scientific red teams. So those of you don't know what red teams are basically adversarial teams that are used in cybersecurity, intelligence, and foresight to tackle and test the tenacity of the hypothesis built by the other team. So basically, what we did was so that we were able to do collaboration with ministries on these type of very big systemic issues like climate impact assessment or public sector strategy or the national transportation framework that are basically, there's a massive infinite amount of evidence that could be used to support building those national initiatives. So it's hard to make sense of where is the policy preparation going, what might be missing from the evidence perspective. So we actually got to open the ministries to open the policy process from very early on and give the unfinished drafts of the policy documents to researcher teams. And then researcher teams analyze those through the lens of evidence. And so they came back and tried to then have a dialogue about what are the weaknesses in the present legislative or other drafts, what are the weaknesses from evidence perspective, and how those could be built further. The second one is phenomenon maps. So basically, these are kind of co-created systematic reviews that are on emerging complex policy issues, where we find also that researcher and policy networks haven't been necessarily formed fully. So academics and policymakers don't talk with each other about the topics. We try to do them also on topics that are not necessarily fully politicized. Yes, as you very well know, that the further politicization also decreases the potential for impact by science on those issues. So we did those topics on, basically these are kind of early horizon scanning systematic reviews that are done in a very lean manner. So we did one on impacts of digital media for youth, and we're doing one on social impacts of quantum technology. And so basically we are able to build new networks and actually, for example, on the social impacts of quantum technology, ministries had to set and appoint responsible civil servants on those topics. So they haven't fully basically formed their own positions yet, even on who would be responsible in ministries. So building the networks is an important part of that, not only on what you put on paper. Sometimes it matters also on how you do it and what kind of networks you build. So you build further organic dialogue afterwards. We also found basically that same researchers are used. So we developed new models for research brokering. We primarily support the Prime Minister's office on try to do kind of the best as possible from the national research talent pool, best multidisciplinary teams that we can put together for them. We also found that a lot of the capacity building for researchers is primarily on science communication, and much less focuses on impact training more broadly, on trying to understand what are how does the government work, where are the impact opportunity windows, what kind of hats am I using as a researcher when I am talking to either media or to politicians, to get a more self-awareness for researchers as well on the impact mindset. And this has been very successful. We basically did one workshop with Finnish Academy, the Finnish Young Academy, and we thought that we get 25 recruits there, but we got in 1.5 days, we got 160 participants joining us, and we had to close the program and the registration. So that's something that we're still building, and we're testing it further and developing with also with the European Commission Joint Research Center and with Finnish universities. And finally, Finland is a small country, so we basically need to also try to utilize as much as possible high quality research synthesis done internationally. So basically things like IPCC reports are coming very easily to Finland because there's a national climate panel, there's an infrastructure and institutional setup for bringing that evidence from international fora to the national fora. But there's a lot of very high quality international evidence that could be much more utilized in the national context. So as a small country, we need to be smart and leverage the international scientific community. So we've been testing models and building a new models of how to domesticate these international high quality scientific reports. So we've got a lot of proof of concepts on all of these 5 different operating models that we've been working on. And we're continuing the work still next year onwards. So our primary objective was with these concepts to show proof of concepts that we're able to make our operations permanent and continue the building work. And so we're very happy in the sense that we've been able to convince the Finnish Academy of Science and Letters to provide permanent funding for us. So we are building a new permanent collaborative science platform in the Finnish Academy of Science and Letters. And we're starting the kind of next era of our development work early next year, where we're continuing building new partnerships, building new modes of operations, developing new operating models, and iterating those that we have already done further. So I'm also reaching out to you as well, because we are making our operations permanent. So all knowledge exchange with you I would very much welcome. We live very close to each other. So, and also at the hybrid era, we're very happy to talk also through web as well. So to share thoughts and understandings. And we've already had very good dialogues with many of you working in evidence policy in Tallinn. So I do appreciate that so far. But I think I'll leave this here, and I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jaakko. A couple of questions from the online platform. So, how can scientists perform or transform their knowledge more suitable for policy advice? You know, what type of measures should be implemented for, you know, to make the scientific knowledge more palpable for the policymakers?
Thank you. It's a very important question, and I think that well, primarily so far the capacity building has been on looking at science communication skills and try to push researchers to rethink their own research in more palatable way, try to create more public synthesis, create blogs, create infographics and all of this. And I think that's all relevant, and that's one part of it. Further, I would say that there's an institutional issue there. What is recognized, under-recognized presently in system is the role and the power of knowledge brokers. So scientists also should have the space and time to do their researchers. And comparatively to how much is invested resources and capacity currently on research, at the surface and at the boundary, the power of knowledge brokers is still not recognized. So knowledge brokers are the experts who can open channels, help academics go to the right place. They can translate the needs and the questions that, for example, civil servants or politicians have, so that the scientists can actually say the right things. So there's a less of talking past each other. So I think that the key presently is facilitation, utilization of knowledge brokers, more systematic than has been done so far.
Thank you. Another question, I think quite relevant as well, is that, you know, how you have motivating researchers to participate this type of service and information gathering, because as we know, like scientists are very much focused on the real science and they don't really care that much about the policy. So how to motivate them to share their ideas?
So that is important question, and we've tackled with that as well. And sometimes we get the answer that we cannot motivate them, and that's perfectly fine as well. Some researchers really don't want to do that, and that's completely their right. And we're happy to let them do their work. There's other researchers who are more prone to try to make an impact. But also with those researchers who are less prone to make impact, what can be done and what can motivate them is one, we can make it easier for them. Knowledge brokers can basically open the doors and build halfway so that actually they will benefit from tremendously from the work that we do in helping them to make the impact. So they get assistance on making impact. That's one motivational driver. Second motivational driver is also that what we found is that when we get researchers to come into the policy setting, actually the only motivation that they found afterwards is that not only that they have been able to tell about their researchers, but they've also been able to potentially learn new ideas about the policy topics that are ongoing in the preparation, that they maybe get new ideas for their future research. And usually when we create multidisciplinary teams, actually the researchers are a lot rewarded by the dialogue that they have on the same topic with the researchers coming from other disciplines. So actually that opens ideas as well to the researchers. So basically support that we can provide them so that they don't have to do as much work, and then also added value that they get from the dialogues other than simply making an impact. So they get new ideas and they will become better researchers afterwards as well.
Thanks, Jaakko. And actually, a last quick question is like how to build stronger bridges between Estonia and Finland on this policy advice and taking the scientific knowledge into the policy making.
Very, very good question. And obviously, first and I'm very pleased to have invitations like this to share our understanding of it. And so this is one step, but clearly we need to go further and build continuous dialogue. And we'd also, I think this makes me reflect that we should extend an invitation to the Estonian community working on these issues and bring you to come and visit us in Finland, where we could do a roundtable and a workshop. So I will put that as one item on my agenda early next year. And also I'm happy to always come to talk about these and brainstorm with our Estonian colleagues in Tallinn, because we live so close by. But I think what we need are at least 2 roundtables, very practical points. 2 roundtables next year, one in Tallinn and one in Finland.
Excellent, thank you. And nice when a presentation ends with the action point, so things to move forward. So thank you again, and let's give a big applause to Jaakko.